Shalom, shalom. Giving honor and praise to the Most High, the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. My name is Yeshiah Yisrael of the tribe of Dan of the nation of Israel. This particular teaching, brothers and sisters, from Avaris to Alabama, part 3, brothers and sisters, is dedicated to help set truth back in the earth concerning the children of Israel and what we as Israelites teach. All right? Let us start. Introduction, shalom. Giving honor and praise to the creator and maker of heaven and earth. This particular teaching will be focused on the external evidence of the matter that the Bible is not plagiarized from Egyptians. It will also deal with the matter that the chronology of ancient Egypt is not 100% accurate due to co-regencies when one takes the current argument that ancient Egypt is the oldest empire or civilization. The presentation then gets into the matter of the Assyrians and the Israelites, and the matter regarding the Israelites and their scattering into parts of Africa. The presentation then gets into the matter of slavery in the Western Hemisphere. Shalom. I am open for constructive criticism. Brothers and sisters, as stated, open for constructive criticism. This particular teaching, I want to state, giving honor and praise to the Creator, is not like other teachings that were presented on this subject on this channel. All right? This right here, I promise, will be different. Stay tuned and see what is being presented. Next slide. The book to get for the information. Now, much of the information that I'm going to state in this presentation comes from this book here that I wrote. So, one may want to go online and buy this book, which is $20 on Amazon. All right? Because there's more information in that book than within the PowerPoint. But much of the information in this presentation is in that book. Next slide. Torah comes from Ma'at. It should be obvious that the cultures are different. The people are different. And the reasoning for each lifestyle are different. The culture, geography, land, climate, and principles for each of the people are different. We'll see. Those who say one culture came from the other don't understand the individual cultures. Brothers and sisters, what I'm saying in that right there is the people who like to say that the Bible is a plagiarism of Egyptian civilization, culture, ideas, and thoughts are people who don't understand either the Egyptian culture or the Hebrew culture. And we want to show differences that cannot be argued against. All right, next slide. Torah comes from Ma'at question mark. Principle number 13, I have not made anyone cry. Where is that in the Torah? Principle number 24, I have not disobeyed the law. Where is that in the Torah? Principle number 39, I have not stolen from or disrespected the deceased. Where is that in the Torah? So the point, brothers and sisters, I wanted to emphasize concerning pointing that particular thing out is the fact that there are certain principles in what they call the 42 negative confessions or the 42 aspects of Ma'at or so forth and so on, that there's certain ones in there that have absolutely nothing to do with the Torah itself. Now, inside of the Egyptian culture, for those who understand the Israelite culture, there is no Sabbath inside the Egyptian culture. There is no seventh-day week. The ancient Egyptians had a 10-day week. So the calendar, thus the timelines will be different between each of the peoples. That is to say, the Israelites and the Egyptians. The ancient Egyptians did not lay claim, brothers and sisters, to, correct me if I'm wrong, state that they were the teachers of the Hebrews. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. Many of the people who are saying that the Torah is a plagiarism or a copy of the Egyptian culture in ways, are people as stated who do not understand the culture of the Egyptians or the Israelites. Next slide. The Akhenaten matter and Torah copied. Some state that Israel copied the belief in one God from Akhenaten, who ruled in the 18th dynasty. Obviously, people knew about believing in one God before Akhenaten. Akhenaten, according to the Torah, would have been a wicked, and I'm just leaving it at that. Akhenaten believed in the Son as God, the S-U-N as a God. Such a doctrine as that is against the teachings of the Torah. Belief in one God and belief in the Most High God are two different concepts. In Deuteronomy chapter 17, verses 2 through 5, we see this. If there be a found among you within any of your gates, which the Lord thy God giveth thee, man or woman, that have wrought wickedness in the sight of the Lord thy God, and transgression his covenant, and have gone and served other gods, and worshipped them, either the sun, or moon, or any of the hosts of heaven, which I have not commanded. And it be told thee, and thou hast heard of it, and inquired diligently, and behold, it be true, and a thing certain, that such abomination is wrought in Israel. Then shalt thou bring forth that man or that woman who have committed that wicked thing unto thy gates, even that man or that woman, and shall stone them with stones till they die. So, brothers and sisters, Akhenaten, brothers and sisters, pouring libations to and paying homage to the S-U-N, brothers and sisters, is against the culture of the Israelites. So Akhenaten inside of the Egyptian culture wasn't even respected, and what he did was against the customs of the Hebrew Israelite culture, the culture of the Hebrews. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. Now, no disrespect intended, when people such as the late scholar John Henry Clarke stated that the Hebrews had no culture before they came into the land of Egypt, that right there is emphatically incorrect, because you had it to where they already knew certain things that you just don't do. They already had part of their culture that you don't eat the sinew of the thigh. They already had part of their culture that you sit there and you deal in circumcision. They already had part of their culture that they knew clean from unclean since the days of Noah. So culture is partly defined as what you do, how you move, how you eat, how you interact. So now when Abraham having to say that Sarah was just his sister and not his wife, many people who try to take shots at the Bible say, well, see, that means Abraham came to Africa with a lie. Let's look at that situation. The Pharaoh, the leader of the land, according to the Bible now, is in the room with Sarah because he wanted to take Sarah as his wife. So we have to ask this question here. If you bring to my house somebody who you say is your sister, what culture makes it right for me to take your said sister into the room with me to make her my wife? Is that the custom of your people? To sit there and take the visitor of your home, the visitor of your country, the visitor of your society, and just marry them and just have your way with her? Is that what your culture induces? So we have to begin to see why Abraham or Abraham would want to say that in the first place. And as Genesis says, the fear of the Most High, he thought was not in that place. And obviously it was not. So this is something we want to point out, brothers and sisters, for edification purposes. So yes, the ancient Hebrews had a culture prior to the time of coming into the land of Egypt. All right, next slide. To cite its remarks, Moses, wishing to secure for the future his authority over the nation, gave them a novel form of worship opposed to all practice by other men. Things sacred with us, the Romans, with them, the Jews, have no sanctity. They abstain from swine's flesh. We are told that the rest of the seventh day was adopted because this day brought with it termination of their toils. Brothers and sisters, you see it right there as part of the culture of Israel. The Sabbath day observance and the fact that they abstain, the Israelites abstained from eating swine's flesh. The ancient Egyptians ate swine's flesh. So you can see there's a difference between such. If your diet is different, then your ruach, your spirit, your gisha, your attitude is different. People speak upon and say quite often, you are what you eat. Next slide. Tacitus remarks, quite different is there, the Jews, about things divine. The Egyptians worship many animals and images of monstrous form. The Jews have purely conceptions of deity or God as one in essence. They call those profane who make representatives of God in human shape or perishable materials. So when you're making something that can be destroyed or thrown out and say that is God, Tacitus is saying that the Jews, that is to say the Israelites, hold those profane who do such. You cannot make your own God. Wood, stone, silver, gold, bronze. You understand? Quite different is there, that is to say the Jews, about things divine. The Egyptians worship many animals and images of monstrous form. So Tacitus dates back, brothers and sisters, to the 1st century AD or CE, all right, as far as being a Roman historian. We have to ask this question, brothers and sisters, in regards to Tacitus, right? He was not even a fan or a friend of the Israelites. Yet he's able to sit there and state that the ways of the Israelites are quite different than the ways of the Egyptians. So no ancient historian, brothers and sisters, is going to be able to have any credit to their merit to say that the Israelites copied the ways of the Egyptians. Next slide. The priesthoods. This is now coming from Leviticus chapter 21. And the Lord said unto Moses, speak unto the priests, the sons of Aaron, and say unto them, there shall none defile himself for the dead among his people. They shall not make baldness upon their head, neither shall they shave off the corners of their beard, nor make any cuttings in their flesh. So now let's look at the left-hand side. This is an image of an Egyptian priest, and you can note and see that he's a bald-head person. Now, in the culture of the Israelites, as we read in Leviticus 21, it says what? Speaking of the priests, they shall not make baldness upon their head, neither shall they shave off the corners of their beard. So here we see on the left-hand side an Egyptian priest, no beard, obviously that's shaved off, and bald. So we're pointing these things out because the culture of the Egyptians and the culture of the Israelites is different. The culture of the Egyptians and the culture of the Israelites are different. Next slide. Daniel chapter 7, verse 9. And I beheld two thrones or place, and one that was ancient of days did sit. His raiment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, and the wheels thereof burning fire. Now, what you're looking at, brothers and sisters, on the right-hand side is a racist picture, even though they was trying to be racist and disrespectful. Lux, which is a soap company inside the United States. What does it say? It won't shrink wool. Now, this right here is saying the one that was ancient of days, the hair of his head like pure wool. But we see the images of the people who have hair like wool, even in this racist ad. So the white man trying to be disrespectful, funny, or insulting, not realizing that the book that's on many black people's grandmother's shelves is speaking of one who was of the ancient of days, having hair like the one that this racist ad is speaking about. So for layman terms, all right, in agreements, the good book speaks highly of those who have hair like lamb's wool. All right, and wool comes from lamb, comes from a sheep. All right, so a sheep is a grown lamb, for those who may want to know for edification purposes. So these right here, brothers and sisters, is something we want to sit there and point out for edification purposes. All right, so let's go on to the next part. An Egyptian record matter. Let's go in. Imperial Papyrus and the Brooklyn Museum Papyrus. Now, the Brooklyn Museum Papyrus, as we went over, and I can put the description inside the video, it actually, brothers and sisters, speaks about the ancient Israelites. All right? Spoke of them as the Amu, or the Asiatics, or the Asiatic slaves. Now, how can one deduce in many cases that many of them would be Israelites is due to the pronunciation of their names, such as you see what is in the box there, one being Issachar, the other being Asher, which is two of the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, this is dated in the Brooklyn Museum Papyrus, brothers and sisters, to the era of Sobek Nefru and the era of Sobek-hotep III of Dynasty 13 of ancient Egypt. Now, what you're looking at, brothers and sisters, on the left-hand side is a copy of the Ipira Papyrus. And this is dated, brothers and sisters, to the same dynasty in the Middle Kingdom of Egypt, Dynasty 13. All right, now the Ipira Papyrus, we're going to go over certain aspects of this so that way we can gain understanding for edification purposes. Both of these written in what you call hieratic. All right, so this is something we want to point out in that particular regard. Next slide. Ipira Papyrus, Part 1. Dated to the era of the Middle Kingdom of Egypt, says in part, indeed, men slaves, their heart sad. Indeed, pestilences throughout the land. Exodus chapter 9, verse 15 says, surely now I have put forth my hand, and smitten thee and thy people with pestilence, and thou hast been cut off from the earth. Next slide. Ipira Papyrus, Part 2. Indeed, men are few, and he who places his brother in the ground is everywhere. Indeed, female slaves are free with their tongues. Indeed, trees are felled and branches stripped off. Exodus chapter 9, verse 25. And the hail smote throughout all the land of Egypt, all that was in the field, both man and beast. And the hail smote every herb of the field and broke every tree of the field. Ipira Papyrus, Part 3. Indeed, scribes are killed and their writings taken away. The above passages from Ipira, especially the last one cited, shows a lot. The scribes were killed, their writings taken away. Who did that and why? Are you trying to hide something? Next slide. Were Egyptian slave masters too? The oppression of Israel. Exodus chapter 1, verse 8. Now there arose a new king over Egypt who knew not Joseph. Next slide. Oppression of Israel, Part 2. Josephus, Antiquities of the Jews, Book 2. They also became very ill affected toward the Hebrews, as touched with envy at their prosperity. For when they saw how the nation of the Israelites flourished and were become eminent already in plenty of wealth, which they had acquired by their virtue and natural love of labor, they thought their increase was to their own detriment, and having in length of time forgotten the benefits they had received from Joseph, particularly the crown now being come into another family, they became very abusive to the Israelites and contrived many ways of afflicting them. For they enjoined them to cut a great number of the channels for the river, and to build walls for their cities and ramparts, that they might restrain the river and hinder its waters from stagnating upon its running over into its own banks. They set them also to build pyramids. Now that's coming, brothers and sisters, from the book of Josephus. Now, we already spoke, brothers and sisters, about the Hebrews, the Israelites, right? Being inside of Egypt and what you call the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. Now, the Middle Kingdom of Egypt, right, encompassed mainly Dynasty 12 and Dynasty 13. As stated in my book, Egypt Talk and Writing, all right? Shout out to the people who bought it. Shout out to the people who support it, all right? Dynasty 13 is when the era of the Exodus occurred. So let's go on into the next particular part. Oppression of Israel, Part 3. It should be noted that the 12th dynasty under Amenemhet the first father did not rule. The ruler before him was Mentuhotep the third or fourth, depending upon which king list one goes by. An Egyptian record called the Prophecy of Nefertiti speaks on the Egyptians getting rid of the Asiatics / the Amu out of Egypt. Now, the Prophecy of Nefertiti is dated, brothers and sisters, to the era of Dynasty 12 of Egypt. Now, for them to have a said prophecy of them getting rid of the Asiatics out of Egypt must have meant the Asiatics had to been in Egypt prior to Dynasty 12. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. The people later on known as the Hyksos, all right, were the rulers of some of those Asiatics. That is to say, these Asiatics in time produced the Hyksos in history. All right, so this is something we want to point out in that particular regard. Now, let's go on into this a little bit more intense. It says in the first paragraph or the first point of this, it should be noted that the 12th dynasty ruler, Amenemhat the first father, did not rule. So now when we go back, brothers and sisters, for edification purposes, all right, and having and left them time forgotten the benefits they received from Joseph, particularly the crown now come into another family. The crown coming into another family being a family of Dynasty 12. Because Amenemhat the first, his father, did not rule. The Mentuhotep, either the third or the fourth, depending upon which king list one to use, was essentially the last ruler of Dynasty 11. All right, so a whole new family came up over the land of Egypt, as Exodus says, who did not know Joseph. So let's go on, brothers and sisters, to the next part. Oppression of Israel, part 4. All right. David Rowe states the following, or stated the following. No Israelite sediment has ever been found in the 19th dynasty occupational levels where the Orthodox chronology predicted its stratigraphical locus. On the other hand, dig down below the 19th dynasty capital and reach the city of Avaris, a vast majority of the population of which was Asiatic. Now, if you remember the title of this, that is to say, from Avaris in Egypt to Alabama in America, now you begin to see how a citation speaks of Avaris. All right, and we're going to continue on with our citations. It goes on to say, the initial influx of Asiatics into the region of the Katana appears to be during the late 12th dynasty, with the first settlement concentrated at the site of Tel El Dab'a. This later became Avaris. All right, so this is something we want to point out, brothers and sisters, for edification purposes. Next slide. Oppression of Israel, part 5. Slavery existed in Egypt. Not until the Middle Kingdom is there evidence of use of numbers of foreigners, Nubians, and Asiatics as domestic servants in Egypt. In another case, a wife was left, among other things, for Amu, that is to say, Asiatic slaves. Now, what am I pointing out in the second point of this PowerPoint right here, right? Is that this is coming from a book called Egypt of the Pharaohs by Sir Alan Gardiner. And it says, as stated in there, in another case, a wife was left, among other things, for Amu, that is to say, Asiatic slaves. This is dated to the Middle Kingdom of Egypt, brothers and sisters. Next slide. Now, look. Not until the Middle Kingdom is there evidence of use of numbers of foreigners, Nubians and Asiatics. So who were these Asiatics in part that this is speaking of in this particular regard? Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel. Next slide. Oppression of Israel, part 6. Now, what you're looking at here, brothers and sisters, on the left-hand side, all right, is the aspect of what? Mud brick pyramids. The structure of this thing is dried mud that was put on top of one another. And the mud brick pyramids date back to the Scorpion dynasty of ancient Egypt, as well as to the Middle Kingdom of ancient Egypt. So this right here is the same image, just shown from a different angle. Same image shown from a different angle. Same image shown from a different angle. Exodus chapter 5. You shall give no more, you shall no more give the people straw to make brick, as heretofore. Let them go and gather straw for themselves. Next slide. External source. Flinders Petrie, a noted archaeologist, spoke on the Asiatics in Egypt, said the following. It is undeniable that the inhabitants used foreign wares, which were derived from the Adrian Islands or from Syria, Palestine. The pyramid builders of ancient Egypt, page 188. The Egyptians did not leave on record themselves never being slave masters. The Egyptians, as the book I wrote points out, erased records. Other ancient historians, from Artapanus as well as to J.A. Rogers, spoke on the Hebrews being enslaved in the land of Egypt. Next slide. The matter of the chronology of ancient Egypt. Next slide. Chronology. The chronology of ancient Egypt is done in the aspect of King's List. One being here, Abydos list, dated to the second intermediate period. That is to say, brothers and sisters, in between the time of what we're talking, dynasty, the Middle Kingdom and the New Kingdom. All right, that particular timing. All right. Not all the kings, such as Akhenaten, Tut, Ai, Hatshepsut, are on that list. The Saqqara list, found in 1860 and dated to the time of Ramses II. Hatshepsut is not mentioned. Neither are the Amarna pharaohs mentioned. Now, the Amarna pharaohs include people such as Akhenaten. Now, we spoke earlier concerning Akhenaten and how he would have been treated in the house of Israel. All right. Now we see, brothers and sisters, that there are certain kings lists that don't even list all their kings. So how then, if you're using a regnal dating, that is to say Regnal, regnal dating, if you're using regnal dating, how then, brothers and sisters, can you sit there then turn around and say, with kings list missing kings and rulers, right? Which means the chronology then is going to be off timeline. How are you going to get an accurate date dated before those kings if some of those kings are not on the list? So until the era of what, 1860, and until certainly the era of the 18th century, when the Europeans began to go heavily into Egypt after the situation with Napoleon Bonaparte, most of the Egyptian records was not known to the Europeans. You understand? I mean, you had Hatshepsut and others, but they really didn't do what you call field work until the era of Napoleon. All right. So this is something we want to point out in that particular regard. Next slide. Chronology part 2. The Medinet Habu list goes from Amenhotep III to Horemhab, thus gives Akhenaten an I. Another one, the Mersil Steel list. Akhenaten or Hatshepsut, nor I, nor Tut are mentioned on that list. So King Tutankhamun, which is the son of Akhenaten, all right, and Hatshepsut, who preceded Akhenaten, is not on that list. Neither is the guy named I. Ramesseum king list, the same are not listed. This becomes important later in the matter of Akhenaten, because as you already spoke, people like to sit there and say that Akhenaten was the spiritual teacher of Moses. But if we can already show for edification purposes that Moses and the Israelites left the land of Egypt prior to Dynasty 18, how then could Akhenaten been the teacher of Moses? Next slide. Chronology part 3. Many state the records left from Manetho are not currently known. Thus, one may have to ask, if the records mainly used as the Palemo, Abydos, Saqqara, as well as the Royal Turin Papyrus are used and all date prior to the time of Dynasty 20, how can we account for the list of kings after Dynasty 20? See, Israelites, when they were being disrespected by, let's say, let's do some of the roll call. Dr. York, Dr. Clark, Dr. Ben, Ashra Kwesi, Moata Ashby, and many others into the Kemetic understanding, who basically, for the great extent, were taking shots and disrespecting the Bible as well as the Israelites. Can they answer if they're those who are listed that's still among us living? Are they able to sit there and answer the question in regards to how the king's list can be gleaned after Dynasty 20 if you're only dealing with the main aspect of the Abydos, Saqqara, and the Royal Turin Papyrus? And I'll tell you how. It's because the scarabs are used for in the testimony of others. That's how they get the king's list after that. All right, next slide. Chronology part 4. The so-called intermediate periods have proved to be particularly awkward phases, partly because there was often more than one ruler or dynasty reigning simultaneously in different parts of the country. So because you had, all right, aspects of co-regencies of people as well as dynasties, to try to sit there and use the scraps, if you will, from Manetho and from the records of some of the other ones that we went over in a chronology kings list, they actually by default push the kings list way back. So that's how they're trying to sit there and get 5,000, 6,000, 7,008, even 10,000 BCE as far as being rulers. But the whole BCE and the AD dating was done, all right, by a guy named Esarhaddon in what is dated to 525 AD. So that's why much of the BCE dating is hypothesized or guesses. So now let's look at this right here, brothers and sisters. Pre-dynastic period of Egypt, early dynastic period of Egypt, the Old Kingdom, first intermediate period, Middle Kingdom of Egypt, second intermediate period. Let's go back. All right. Okay, I missed that part that I wanted to go over. But let's continue on, brothers and sisters, and look at this right here, right? Because I stated earlier correctly, right, that the second intermediate period is between the Middle Kingdom and the New Kingdom, right? Now let's look at this right here. You had, as stated, 11th and 12th and 13th. Many people state 13th is part of the Middle Kingdom. All right. So these dates that they're getting, brothers and sisters, if we already look back at the Medonet Habu list, the Mersil Steel list, the Ramesseum King list, the Saqqara list, the Abydos list, and then you're going to go into some trying to say they still got something on Manetho left on record. How then, brothers and sisters, do you get these dates? And there are kings lists that are mentioned that don't have all the kings there. There, to be candid, brothers and sisters, you had some of these people at the same time ruling. Let me give an example. You had Dynasty 14, all right, ruling at the same time as Dynasty 17. While Dynasty 15 and 16, 16 followed 15. Correction, pardon me. It was Dynasty 14, then followed by Dynasty 17. I stand corrected, all right? Dynasty 14 was followed by Dynasty 17, while at the same time, Dynasty 15 was followed by Dynasty 16. Dynasty 15 and 16 is what you call Lower Egypt or Upper Egypt. Pardon me, Lower Egypt or the northern part of Egypt. Because the ancient Egyptians viewed the northern part of their land as lower and the southern part of their land as upper because of the flow of the Nile. So let's go over this one more time. All right. You have it to where Dynasty 14 is followed in Egypt, Upper Egypt, by Dynasty 17. While in Lower Egypt, you had Dynasty 15 followed by Dynasty 16. Now, Dynasty 15 and 16 were not even native Egyptians. All right. So, with that being the case, we have to wonder what's going on. So, now the first intermediate period, getting back to that, Dynasty 7 and Dynasty 8 was simultaneous in reigning at the same time. All right. So this is something we want to emphasize in this particular regard. Now, not saying that all records from all nations don't have any flaws or dates as far as question marks as you see here. But how then, I want to ask this question, brothers and sisters, right? How do you have a question mark for Dynasty 13 and 14, but there's no question mark with the dating? How does that happen? If I have to question what belongs in the second intermediate period, all right, by having a question mark there, then by default, I must have to question the dating that you see as 1773 to 1500 BCE. So you can't have a question mark here and be clarified over here with the dating. Let's go on. So then you got the new kingdom of Egypt under Amos, then Akhenaten and Tutankhamen and Hamsetset and Thutmose III. But as we already went over, when you look at some of those kings lists, Akhenaten as well as Tut, which is Tutankhamun, and Hatshepsut is not even listed on many of those kings lists. This is why the chronology becomes important for edification purposes, because one of the things that the so-called Kemetic community try to come up against Israelites about is, well, what about your kings and what about the dating? We can ask you the same question. What about these datings that you see right here? You understand? This is something we want to point out in that particular regard. You know what happens in many cases once that's pointed out? Because many into the Kemetic community don't claim to be the true people of Sematawi. They don't claim to be the true people of Waset, aka Thebes. They don't be claiming, brothers and sisters, to be the true people of Menophar, aka Memphis. They don't claim to be the people who were in operation of the Iteru, that is to say the Nile. They just claim Egyptian science, Kemetic science. They don't claim the culture, the history of the people. So once it comes to showing the kings list, many in the Kemetic community are like, so what? Because you never cared about it in the first place, because you don't claim to be those people. So this is something we want to point out, brothers and sisters, for edification purposes. Now let's bring it on home, House of Israel. All right? Egypt is done for that. Stick a fork in it. No disrespect intended. Assyria, Babylon, Persia. 3 black nations over the Israelites. Next slide. Let's bring it on home. The Assyrian rulers from Tiglath-Pileser III to Esarhaddon all spoke of the Israelites, confirming the biblical record. One says this: I received tribute from Jehoiakim of Judah. This is dated, brothers and sisters, to the timing when the Assyrians came into power and they had hegemony over the tribe of Judah. Now, this is recorded in a book called Ancient Near East in Text and Pictures, a book you can get on Amazon by James Pritchard. James Pritchard wrote that book called The Ancient Near East in Text, page 193. Another part says this: I received tribute from Menahem of Samaria. Now, Samaria, all right, was one of the places of main focus concerning the northern kingdom of Israel in the ancient days. It was set up, all right, by either Omri or either Ahab, all right, kings that ruled in the northern tribes of Israel, all right. The Ancient Near East, page 193, same source. They overthrew their king Pekah, and I placed Hosea as king over them. The Ancient Near East in Text and Pictures by James Pritchard, page 194. So we can cite our sources and citations. Now, these people that we read of, Menahem, as well as Jehoiahaz, as well as Pekah, as well as Hosea, is all mentioned in the Book of Kings, in the Book of Second Kings, in the Bible. All of them people that we mentioned from Judah, from Samaria, all of them are mentioned in the scriptures. And all of them, and speaking of them in the Bible, speak about the Assyrians having hegemony over them. So the Assyrians spoke about ruling over the Israelites. The Israelites spoke about being ruled over by the Assyrians. So the Israelites are not trying to paint a picture in history that they was all great and that nobody ever defeated them. And when something bad happens, oh my goodness, we don't know what happened. Because the prophets of Israel said Assyria came against an ungodly people. That's why the Most High gave commission of the Assyrians over the Israelites. Next slide. Let's bring it home, part 2. Sargon speaks of the taking captive of Samaria. Hebrewisms of West Africa, page 123, says the following: I carried away 27,290 of its inhabitants. I collected their 50 chariots. The remnants of them I permitted to retain their goods, put my governors over them, and I laid the tribute of former kings upon them. Do you know what the tribute of former kings upon somebody else is? They're not paying me, and I'm going to lay you to be guilty for paying me for them. That today is what France does to Haiti. Haiti pays France for being free. Did you know that? The Haitian government pays the French government to this day money, brothers and sisters, for being free. That in modern times is what the Assyrians did here and was called what? I laid the tribute of former kings upon them. Put my governors over them. So in the book of Isaiah, where it speaks about the Assyrians, when it says strangers are in your land ruling in your presence, we can see what it's talking about. Next slide. Let's bring it home, part 3. Put my governors over them. An example we see here. And no, the Assyrians were not white. I'm just using that as a source for edification purposes, as far as putting the governors over them, because governors, as you know, like even in the United States, to a certain extent, are puppets of the government itself. So these people who are procurators or rulers, or that is to say, people who had hegemony directly over the Israelites, were puppets of the Assyrians. Next slide. Let's bring it home, part 4. Laid the tribute of former kings upon them. When the tribute was not paid, the city was besieged. Tribute today is referred to as rent and mortgage. Don't pay it, you have the guy here named Mr. Marshall coming. So it's the same point and premise. It's part of having hegemony over you. When you're paying somebody rent, you are in debt to that person. You don't own it. They own it. He or she owns it. And you're paying them to rent it. And this has become an unfortunate situation for many people. I'm really talking about my own people, our people, all right, that we have become generational renters. Next slide. The Assyrian came down. So you see their capital there, Nineveh, came down 722 BCE, as you see, into Israel, and then Israel is going right into the Assyrian province. Now, we already read, brothers and sisters, that he spoke about taking less than 30,000 Israelites into the Assyrian province. Now, for edification purposes, brothers and sisters, When he said, I collected their 50 chariots, the chariots of the ancient world is like having a Beamer today. It's like having perhaps maybe an RV of today, because that was a very necessary thing for those who were of royalty to have the chariots. You understand? Now, looking at it on this side, when it says Assyrian Empire, so you can see what we're talking about in that particular regard. Next slide. The Assyrian and Babylonian matter. Assyria, as you see here, and then Babylon took over Assyria, brothers and sisters, in what we're speaking about, the aspect of the 7th century BCE. All right, next slide. The book I wrote. In the book I wrote, I detailed the matter of what happened between the fall of Assyria and the rise of Babylon in regards to the Israelites. The Assyrians fell to the Babylonians in the era of Jeremiah and Nahum and King Josiah of Judah in the 7th century BCE. When we read the Babylonian came down as if from the north, is due to the Babylonian hegemony over where the Assyrians were. See, in Jeremiah chapter 1, it says that the Most High will call for the kings of the north to come against the people of Judah, and every man shall set his entrance at the gate of Jerusalem. That is the sign of being besieged, all right? Now, the new Babylonian Empire was Babylon, as you see right here on the map, but this is north of where the tribe of Judah was, or would have been right over here. So you added to where the people were called from the north. That is to say, Babylon being called from the north, where Assyria ruled, Babylon ruled in its place and took the Israelites captive and transported them to Babylon. All right. Now, one of the things they did, and I don't mean to be too graphic, all right, it says that they slew the sons of Zedekiah, king of Judah, before his eyes, and then they put out his eyes. So the last thing he saw was that. So when you read about Saul and later on about Zedekiah and the people making sport of them, brothers and sisters, the Babylonians didn't have. Certainly when you read, for instance, the Code of Hammurabi, a prohibition against a man penetrating another man. So making sport was embarrassing. In jail system, it's like that, where they sit there and make you their girl. I'm not going to use the B word because that's not edification. All right. But that's something that when they quote unquote take another person's manhood, that's what Saul was worried about the Philistines doing to him. That's what the Philistines did to Samson. All right. In the aspect of saying, at least they come and make sport of me, or would have done unto him. You understand? So what they did, brothers and sisters, to the aspect of King Zedekiah would have not been far-fetched. All right. Next slide. The book I wrote. All right. Already read that part. Babylon and Judah. Warner Keller, in his book entitled The Bible as History and Pictures, states the following: 10 seller of oil for Yaokin, king of Judah, 2.5 seller for the sons of the king of Judah. Judah mentioned in Babylonian records as captives. So this right here is an external source, brothers and sisters, speaking of the Israelites, namely the southern kingdom of Judah, all right, as far as being captive in the land of Babylon. So the Bible speaks about it. When you go, brothers and sisters, to 2 Kings chapter 24, the Babylonians spoke about it. So it's not too hard to figure out, brothers and sisters, that it has to be an accurate statement, because you got the oppressor and the oppressed saying the truth in the same story concerning who's the oppressor and who's the oppressed. All right, so it holds true. Next slide. Babylon fell to Persia. Babylon fell to Persia in the 6th century BCE. All right. May my teacher, Chi Simeon, my first main teacher in history, rest in peace. Let's go in, Yisrael. The Babylonians spoke of capturing Judah. And Jeremiah chapter 50, verse 33 says, thus saith the Lord of hosts, the children of Israel and the children of Judah are oppressed together, and all that took them captives hold them fast. They refuse to let them go. So, brothers and sisters, Babylon, all right, was defeated by the Persians, just as much as Babylon, all right, defeated the Assyrians. So this is something I want to point out when I went into the next aspect of these slides. When I said about Assyria, Babylon, and Persia, the 3 black different nations that oppressed the children of Israel, this was done for edification purposes. All right. So Let's go on, brothers and sisters. Babylon and Timbuktu. Rudolf Windsor in his book, May the Most High continue to strengthen and bless the life of Rudolf Windsor, another scholar, all right? In his book, From Babylon and Timbuktu, speaks of the fact that after the Israelites in part were freed from the Babylonian captivity, some stayed under the Persian hegemony in modern southern Iraq. Some went back to Jerusalem, and some went to Egypt and became known as the Elephantine Jews. Now, in other presentations, we spoke about the Jews at Elephantine Island. All right? There's a teaching I'm going to put inside the description, and it's called Deuteronomy 28, or that is to say, how to explain Deuteronomy 28, part 2. All right? So we're going to go on to the next slide, because in that, you begin to see the aspect of the Elephantine Jews more. Next slide. Persian Empire. The Persian Empire was from 538 to 331 BCE. The Persians made Sheshbazzar a governor. Ezra chapter 5, verse 14 in the scripture says this: and the gold and silver vessels also of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took out of the temple that was in Jerusalem, and brought them into the temple of Babylon. Those did Cyrus the king take out of the temple of Babylon, and they were delivered unto one whose name was Sheshbazzar, whom he had made governor. So, as we pointed out before with the Assyrians, and put my governors over them, as had been pointed out before in the book of Exodus, that they did set taskmasters over the children of Israel. Now, these governors, brothers and sisters, all right, that you see in the Persian Empire were not always necessarily bad. So let's go on to the next slide. Persian Empire, part 2. Sheshbazzar led in 538 BC some Israelites back to Jerusalem. Next slide. Persian, Yahud. Now, this is part, brothers and sisters, a map, all right? Persian period, all right? When it says Judah or Yahud, the Yehud or the Yahud province, all right, that belonged under the hegemony of the Persians. And this right here is Yod, Hey, Dalet, Yahud, Yahud, all right? The actual Persian transliteration of the Hebrew Yahuda, which is transliterated into English as Judah, all right? So this is what we want to point out in that particular regard. Next slide. Tribal and follow on the Jews, part 1. Respect on a human level to Kohen Mikael from Hashaba, my Hebrew teacher. He stated in his book, Israelites and Jews, the significant difference, the following. I suggest people go online and get that book, Israelites and Jews, the significant difference. And I say this, and not to be haughty, but if you respect me as a teacher, can you only imagine what my teachers were like? Because I can tell you that I have not reached up to their level yet. So if people respect me, not to be haughty, but if people respect me as a brother and as a teacher, can you only imagine how it was sitting under the great Kohen Mikael? May the Most High continue to bless and strengthen his life. Philo in 40 BC to 40 AD, who lived in Alexandria, Egypt, stated that 1 million Hebrews resided from Libya and Egypt, from the Maccabeestv to the border of Ethiopia. The Maccabeestv, brothers and sisters, is in modern day Libya. All right. So Philo, who was in the 1st century BCE to the 1st century CE, all right, is noted for saying that there's 1 million Hebrews that resided in Libya and Egypt, from the Maccabeestv to the border of Ethiopia. What would stop them from even going into Ethiopia? What would stop them, brothers and sisters, from going either further west from the Sudan? What would stop them from going either further west into Uganda, further south to Uganda? Nothing. Because if they can migrate, brothers and sisters, into certain parts such as Libya, Egypt, and going toward the borders of Ethiopia, being, according to Strabo, 1 million strong, it's not too hard to figure out, brothers and sisters, what this is talking about. The Israelites did not sit there and go on their own accord to Europe on their own accord. Maybe politics, maybe economy, maybe war caused some people while already in Africa to go to Europe. But it was not by your own volition. If it's by poverty, by war, or by one's death, then you just had to get away. All right, next slide. Strabo and Strabo on the Jews, that is to say the Israelites, part 2. In his book, Israelites and Jews, A Significant Difference, published in 1997, Levite and teacher, Kohen Mikael stated the following. The Greek historian and geographer Strabo wrote concerning the Hebrews of Cyrene, that is to say in Libya. Now these Hebrews already have gotten into all cities, and it is hard to find a place in the habitable earth that has not emitted this tribe of men. So wherever, according to what Strabo was saying, is that once it came down to the Israelites, there's not a place in the habitable earth that has not emitted this sort of men. And you have to look, for instance, brothers and sisters, 63 BCE. That is the time, brothers and sisters, correct me if I'm wrong, when Pompey of Rome was coming to power. So you have already a Greek historian and geographer speaking about the Hebrews, that is, say, the Israelites, that was in Libya. Why does the aspect of Pompey become important concerning what we're talking about with the dating there? Is because of this. Trajan of Rome, all right, who was some decades after Pompey, all right, tried to sit there and put down a uprising by the Israelites in what you call Libya. Trajan of Rome is responsible for trying to quell the spirit of the house of Israel that was in the land of Libya when they wanted to go back to their own land. You see how that connected into history? Next slide. Let's go in Israel. No English allowed for the next 3 slides. Now you're going to see English, but for the next 3 slides, and I say in due respect, we're just going to go in nothing but Hebrew. Next slide. Masa Bahamot Negev, Be'eretz Zara, Wazukwa, Labi, Walaish, Mehem, Fe Wasaraf, Me'ofef, Yithu Al Ketef, Ayarim, Kelehem, Wa'al Dabeshet, Gemalim, Ot Rotam, Al Am Lo Yodiel. Akim wa Akyot. Hamelim Asha Ani Kwarati, Ani Mekwawe Atem Mebini. Im Atem Beburut Al Milai. Atem Yukolim Rat Oti. Wakasha Ani Gamorati. But si Urhaze Ani Omir et Mispari Lakem. Likrat Oti. Ledabir Al Hanose Aladot. Achai wa Achyotai. Zikwana wa Ziknotai. Aladot Parutze et Bnei Israel. Lo Kopaate Haaretz. Me Zafona. Me Negba. Me Quedma. Me Araba. Ata Yodea. Anatnu Namshi. Wakata Peri Bitnaka. Basar Baneka Ubnonteka. Asho Natan Laka Yodewahe Elohiaka. Bamazor Ub Mazok. Asho Yazik Laka Oibeka. Ko Amor Yodewahe Elohe Israel. Hini me save. Et Kile Ha Milchama. Asho Beyetkem. Asho Atem Nilkamim Bam et Melek Babel. We et Hakasdim. Hazarim Alechem. Mekutz Lachoma. Wa Asafti. Otam El Tok. Ha'ir Hazot. Atem Yod In. Asha Ani Kwarati. Beterem. Mesefer Debarim. Wa Akare. Mesefer Hanabi Yirmiyah. Kol Hanbi'in. Nebi Ha'el Elyon. Dibru Be'emet. Wa Kol Debarim. Ashel Hem Omri. Yihyu le Yisrael. Ki Yisrael Sabru et Mitzvot Ha'el Elyon. Ha'amim ha'rotzim hem b'nei Israel ha'labanim ha'hudim. Eineihem mekwabri. L'sif Ram. Wagam King, the Sipuram. Ko, Ruakazadon. Ba Yisrael, Bamalkehem. Wagamet Hazonot. Ashel Haku El Melek Shalomo. Wagam King, Hanashim. Ashel Bishlu et Haben. Wehem Aklu et Benehem. Wagam King, Benah. He Akla. Halabani. Lo Ratsu Lishmoa. Hasipurim Haraim Kimohem. Anatnu Namshi. Weheshib Kayote Wahe Mitzrayim. Ba'anio Baderek Asher Amorati Laka. Lo Tosif O Lirota. Wahit Makoratem Sham Lo Oibeka. La Abadim Malish Fakot Wa Enquone. Meterem Ani Bi Orati. Etamilim Haele Asher Ani Kwarati. Al Cain Yisrael Nasu Akar Irehem Baish Zeloto Anaknu Namshi. The matter of Anthony Johnson. Now, brothers and sisters, what I did in the previous 3 slides as stated, no English allowed. Why did I do that? Is so you can begin to hear Hebrew. And I want to state it wasn't for arrogant purposes. It wasn't I know, haha, you don't know. It wasn't for that. But I can't help at the same token. While they hope black people don't know something outside of basketball, we want to sit there and have it be known that we know something beside that. Not that we got to prove anything per se to anybody. But at the same token, when you're presenting yourself to the world, certainly like on YouTube, certainly like when you're writing books, you're presenting yourself to the world. There's nothing wrong with letting them know that you know something. You understand? Now, I spoke a second ago about basketball, right? Brothers and sisters, I want to take a slight intermission, if you will, from the aspect here. If we speak or look, brothers and sisters, what's going on now, like last week and so forth and so on. Like with LeBron James and making the school and having the school to be built, right? How, brothers and sisters, I want to ask, how can anybody, brothers and sisters, in their right mind hate upon that? See, I see a picture where they say a white woman by the name of Michelle Campbell is said to be the executive director of the LeBron James Family Foundation and chief operating officer of the school. We speak in English. It's a European language. Some white man told some person in my immediate family as well as yours what English is. Passed by force. So, we use the internet, which is ran by white people. Many of the books that we cite, such as the external sources, are written by white people. Now, there's a two-thing aspect I want to speak on that. It being written by said white people doesn't mean that I ought to sit there and love you because you wrote some truth. Because you wrote yourself as a criminal concerning the Atlantic slave trade doesn't mean that because I'm citing you and you happen to be a Caucasian person doesn't mean that I'm going to sit there and embrace and open arms and we all want to be friends and hold hands. No. You understand? So we want to point that out for edification purposes. How can anybody, I want to state again, be happier with a black man taking a basketball? And I'm not the biggest basketball player myself. At one time, on a side note, I was the basketball player. You know, I was always the person standing on the 2-point line making a shot when I was in junior high school. But by the time my brother got in high school, I was what you call a scrub. once it come down to basketball. I'm like, no, this ain't my thing. I can't make no points. I'm people making points all on me and everything like that. I'm like, this ain't for me. You understand? But how can, brothers and sisters, can anybody in their right mind take shots or attempt to disrespect a man for opening up a school for children in Ohio, but you okay with him playing games? You're okay with him getting a ring? You're okay with him winning a game? You're okay with him making shots, playing games? Basketball is basically playing games. But when he comes serious and builds something for a community of his own people, who do you sit there and see hating upon him? It wasn't CNN because they interviewed LeBron James. You know who's hating on him? Niggas. Next slide. Just getting started. The first slave owner in America was not only a black man, he went to court and demanded it. In 1654, it was time for Anthony to release John Caesar. Stop. It was time for Anthony to say, that is Anthony Johnson, to release John Caesar. Who made the law for him to be released? Question one. Let's go in. A black indentured servant. Instead, Anthony told Caesar he was extending his time. Caesar left and became employed by the free white man, Robert Parker. Anthony Johnson sued Robert Parker in a Northampton court in 1654. Stop. It was illegal for black people knowing how to read. So you know you wasn't becoming no court judge or no lawyer, public defender, or anything of that sort, because you couldn't read in most cases legally during that era once it came down to our ancestors. In 1655, the court ruled that Anthony Johnson could hold John Caesar indefinitely. The court gave judicial sanction for blacks to own a slave of their own race. Thus, Caesar became the first permanent slave and Johnson the first slave owner. Now, I've gone over this in different parts, but we want to keep on emphasizing how much they think, who they refer to as niggers, do not read. When they say, if you want to keep money from quote unquote black people, hide it in a book, they mean those kind of things. How in the world can a person that is named in record as Anthony Johnson can be a black man that is the first slave holder? Because according to this concept, it's saying that everyone before that was indentured servants. So we have to ask then, did the indentured servants get names from the Europeans themselves? Because Anthony Johnson is recorded in the Portuguese record as Antonio the Negro. When you go and check that out in a book by Horton and Horton entitled Slavery and the Making of America. There is a book that is called Slavery and the Making of America by Horton and Horton, which speaks of the same matter concerning the guy Anthony Johnson. So according to the spirit of this meme, if we see here that John Caesar was a black indentured servant and he became under the court rule under Anthony Johnson as the first permanent slave. So therefore, one is saying in this meme that everyone who was a servant or enslaved or made to work against one's will, perhaps, was only an indentured servant. So my question then is, if they were deemed as indentured servants, according to the spirit and the aspect of this meme, how in the world did John Caesar get the name John Caesar? How do we get the name Anthony Johnson? Were the people deemed as indentured servants given names permanently by the people who they were working for? They swear niggas don't read. They swear black people are stupid. This is why I go and I talk about these kinds of things periodically. As it says in the scriptures, be times and often. Not saying I'm a prophet, because the scriptures saying be times and often is how the Most High sent his prophets out. I'm not saying I'm a prophet. You understand? What I am saying is that I'm attempting in the name of the Most High to sit there and bring this kind of information out to his people, because the other people swear that us as a people don't read, don't reason when we do read. You know why? Because we rather see LeBron James take the basketball and put it in a hole as opposed to LeBron James building something that would have little black boys and girls reading. See, that's the difference. That's the things that we're talking about for edification purposes. That's a question I pose. Were the people who were deemed to be indentured servants given names from the people that they worked for? All right, let's go in. America was named in honor of Amerigo Vespucci in the 16th century. Check. How can a black man be the pioneer of American slavery in 1655? That's a question I ask. Here we go, and here's the reason why. In Brothers and Sisters, 1621, Yisrael, us, our ancestors, was brought to Brazil by the Dutch. In 1646, the Dutch took Yisrael, our people, to New York. In 1517, Charles V has Yisrael, that's us, sold as slaves in what is now Florida. Florida became a state in 1845. It was never a colony. Florida was never part of what you call the 13 colonies. It became a state in 1845. Brothers and sisters, this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. All right? Next slide. Reason why I'm saying this and going over this part right here with 1621 and 1646 and 1517 is because when you look at this lion meme, right, this is dated to 1654 and 1655, the pioneer of American slavery. Now, this is dated, according to the meme, in the 17th century AD or the 17th century CE. When were people dressing like that in the 1600s? They swear I keep telling you that our people do not read. They swear I keep on telling you that they swear our people are ignorant. Because many of us, some of us, unfortunately, any of us, would rather see LeBron James shoot the basketball in there and get another ring and win another championship as opposed to being an influence to a little black boy, a little black girl to want to learn to read better, to learn to do math better. I was talking, not going to blow up the person's identity, but this is my cousin I'm talking about. This particular person is a very bright and intelligent person. This person lives in another state. That's the only information that I'm going to give concerning my cousin. My cousin, when my cousin hears this, knows of the person I'm speaking of. When I needed help with traveling, I called my cousin, got good advice. When I needed help in regards to relationships, called my cousin, very good advice. This is why in the multitude of counselors, there's safety. That's what the scriptures teach. You understand? But they swear our people don't read and put two to two together. We're supposed to be playing games and playing sports. And I don't take no shot against the Platters of old, which was a singing group, the Cadillacs of old, which was a singing group, Lena Horne, may she rest in peace, may the other people I mentioned rest in peace. But like Malcolm X said, how are you going to ask the entertainers about politics and bringing it up even to the 1990s? How are you going to, and I say this in no disrespect, how are you going to sit there and have Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls, aka Christopher Wallace, as the political spokesperson for the people when they were actors and entertainers in movies and making songs? We don't have no governors. We don't have no congressmen. We don't have no lawyers. We don't have no politicians. And what I'm saying is this: we are deemed to be the entertainers, like Black entertainment television. Keep the niggas clapping and singing and being happy. Never give them the one umbrella to sit there and think. Because now we can sit there and make some nonsense meme and niggas will sit there and believe anything because we already know that they don't want to read. And we already know they're going to keep on clapping their hands. So that way, when a black man who is known for playing games in the sports arena, when he sits there and builds a school, they want to keep on clapping hands. But you can't keep on clapping hands when it's time to learn. So the clapping of the hands cease and the opening of the ears begin. You understand? Next slide. Killing the Lion meme part 2. Now remember, this is dated brothers and sisters, all right, to the 17th century AD, 1654 and 1655. Now let's look at here. In 1562, French attempted to colonize Florida. In 1441, the slave trade started when Galconves worked for Henry the Navigator. In 1494, the Treaty of Tordesillas by Columbus's financiers. Columbus had a Hebrew interpreter named Aaron Lopez. Hebrew? Why would Columbus in his voyage have a Hebrew translator? Why not have a mental netta translator? Because they didn't know nothing about no mental netta like that. After the aspect of Cleopatra speaking it, once it came down to the Europeans, maybe I stand to be corrected on that one. But Columbus had a Hebrew interpreter. Why would he need to have one unless he thought he was going to run into the Hebrews? Let's go on. In 1529, the Treaty of Zaragoza by Charles V, and he was the same who was asked to get the blacks from West Africa instead of slaving the natives of this land, that's to say in the Western Hemisphere. The Asiento, the thing that John Hawkins took advantage of. John Hawkins was working for Queen Elizabeth I. Queen Elizabeth I, correct me if I'm wrong, was the daughter of Queen Mary I. All these people are Europeans, and all of them were enslavers. So when you have a black girl marrying Charles, the Prince of England or whatever like that, that lady married into a family of enslavers. That lady who said, correct me if I'm wrong, that she could pass for white, even though you can look at her and say, you're not white, lady, married into a family of enslavers. Next slide. Killing the Lion, Mean Part 4. The Dutch dropped Israel, that's to say us, and Guadeloupe and Martinique for the French, took over Portuguese ships, and when England had a civil war, the Dutch took over the slave trade. Next slide. Killing the Lion, Mean Part 5. Barbados in the time of the 1640s had over 10,000 yearly shipped to by the British. They made it a breaking ground for the captives. That is to say in the land of Barbados. Barbados is the Portuguese word meaning beard. All right. Many was shipped after to what became the United States. John Punch, that is to say a black man in 1640 was made a permanent slave. John Punch in 1640 was made a permanent slave. Now, if that's the case, then how then could we see here where it says what? Thus Caesar, that's to say John Caesar, became the first permanent slave. How was that dated, brothers and sisters, here to the 1650s and said to be the first permanent slave when John Punch, over 10 years prior to that, was made a permanent slave? Look up John Punch in the same book I cited earlier. That book I could mention inside the description. It is called Slavery in the Making of America by Horton and Horton. All right. So this is something we want to point out in that regard. George Yarley had permanent slaves and he died in 1627. When you read about the people taken in 1619 to Jamestown, Virginia, George Yarley got 15 of them as his personal slaves. And he died in 1627. So if they were made permanent slaves and he died in 1627, brothers and sisters, one more time, that shows you that meme is a lie. Leonard Calvert had permanent slaves in 1641. Brothers and sisters, look up these names, Leonard Calvert, George Yarley, and John Punch, and see what you come up with. Read, my brother. Next slide. The Barbary matter, and was it blacks as captors? See, these are things we want to sit there and go into for edification purposes. Because on this channel, which is called Moreh Yeshiah History Lessons, giving honor and praise unto the Most High, I like to say that I take the time out to glean information and try to be a careful and reliable historian, a careful and humble brother, because I don't mind constructive criticism. Because believe you me, I do get the text messages, work on this, work on that. You understand? Next slide. Killing the lion meme, a different one. Now, let's read this meme on the right-hand side. It says this: ask the average school student about slavery, and they think that only white people had slaves. In the 16th to 18th century, Africans enslaved 1.5 million white Europeans in the Barbary slave trade. Whites were the first people to stop slavery in modern times, whereas slavery still continues in Africa to this day. And like the meme that we see here, it says political correctness must die. So what you're doing instead of being politically correct is making dates and not citing any sources in your meme and creating a lie. Essentially, like this right here is a lie. And you see the same logo, political correctness must die. Now, let's read. This here, this works when one may not study. Books, not videos, are to be studied. Why do you think I cite sources in books? I'm not going to sit there, brothers and sisters, and just point out another video. Hey, I'm going to send you somebody else's video. I ain't going to send you my video because I didn't make no videos, but I'm going to sit there and send you a bunch of other people's videos. Nah, Moreh Yeshiah doesn't operate like that. And it's not to be haughty. If I'm walking with the title of Moreh, at least come with your own information and let the people decide whether they accept it or not. But don't sit there and come to somebody with a bunch of other videos from other people and then expect them to sit there and just jump on the bandwagon. You understand? Now, YouTube is not a satisfactory source in any degree of higher learning. YouTube is not a satisfactory source in any degree of higher learning. You cannot sit there unless it's a YouTube class based upon computer or a YouTube class based upon what you call aspect of speech in college, all right, in which they might sit there and accept that. You cannot go into an English class with that. You cannot sit there and go into a math class with that because they're going to want you to do your own work. All right, correct me if I'm wrong on that one. Now let's read this right here. Ask the average school student about slavery. Let's stop right there. In New York, you have what's called, as stated in times past, James Madison High School in Brooklyn. James Madison, brothers and sisters, was a slave master. So, remembering that James Madison is a school, a public school, and that it's named after a slave master. And there were many black students that was there in the 1980s and the 1990s. It says, ask the average school student about slavery. You mean like in the kind of schools that's named after slave masters? And they think that only white people had slaves. So that right there is a shot at or an attempt to disrespect. In this particular first paragraph there, that those who go to school only think this and that. See, I take offense when somebody takes a shot at school because my grandmother was said to walk a mile with newspapers in the bottom of her shoes in the 1930s in order for her to get to school. You understand? In order for my grandmother to get to school in the 1930s, she walked a mile with newspaper in her shoe. So when somebody now tries to take a shot against going to college or try to debase the idea as this meme does about learning in school, I have a problem with that. And I have a problem, brothers and sisters, when parents just sit there and think the teachers should be doing the parenting. Go over your homework. I said it correctly. Go over your homework with your child in their later schoolwork. See, the homework that's given to children, many teachers refer to it as the later schoolwork. It is your job as a parent when you're home part of your work is to go over the later schoolwork with your children. It's not an easy thing being a parent. All right. Now let's look at this here. It says in the 16th to 18th century, Africans enslaved 1.5 million white Europeans in the Barbary slave trade. Remember what it says. From the 16th to the 18th century. That is to say, from the 1500s to the 1700s. From the 1500s to the 1700s. But you have it right here when Galconves worked for Henry the Navigator of the Portuguese in the 15th century. So even if you want to talk about the aspect of the Barbary slave trade, and you're saying here that Africans are the ones who were the oppressors in that particular regard, it still is after the aspect of the Portuguese taking our ancestors. See, they think we don't put two to two together. Now let's look. Whites were the first people to stop slavery in modern times, whereas slavery still continues in Africa to this day. Next slide. Killing the Lion Meme, a different one, part two. Because remember, the one on Anthony Johnson was part one. This is part two, a different one. Now, the Barbary slave trade, according to this meme, is said to be when Africans had Europeans as captives. Yet they who were the captives were Arabs, not Africans. They who were the captors. The captor oppresses the captive. Okay? They who were the captors were they of the Ottoman Empire, not they of, say, the Songhai, Zegzag, Oyo, or Ashanti empires. See, the Songhai or the Songhai, the Zegzag, the Oyo, or the Ashanti, those are four different aspects of black kingdoms in Africa in history. They were not the ones responsible for having white people inside the Barbary slave trade. You know who was responsible for that? Was the Arabs. So we want to point this out right here, that when it says Africans enslaved 1.5 million white Europeans, you're lying. It was the Arabs of the Ottoman Empire who were descended politically from the Turks, not people such as they of the Songhai, the Zegzag, the Oyo, or the Ashanti. They swear one more time. They swear one more time. Pardon the language. They swear who they call niggas don't read. That we were not supposed to put two to two together. That we were not supposed to pick up a book. We're not supposed to support LeBron James inside of this kind of thing. We're supposed to be upset because he's not making the shot. How dare you open up a school, nigga? You're supposed to sit there and keep playing these games. And then you wonder why the black women don't respect us. Because, see, it was a good thing and an idea for a theory. And I say this in no disrespect, like with Umar Johnson, and he wanting to build a school, and he has not produced anything. Then you got people saying, well, you had LeBron James who did it, but it's under the aspect of the European thing. So how in the world can you sit there and knock on that, brothers and sisters, when Umar Johnson praises himself for having a degree? The degree that Umar Johnson bigs himself on, no offense intended to the man, is not from the University of Sakori. You know what that was? The University of Sakori was in Timbuktu, which was in Mali. He did not get his degree from the university named Sekori or Segori, according to some, in pronunciation, in Timbuktu, where they had in Mali a university. That's not where Umar Johnson got his degree from. So when Umar Johnson speaks of his degree, he's talking about from the European institutions and schools, not from the Zegzag, not from the Oyo, not from the Songhai, and not from the people in Mali and Timbuktu. He got his degree from the European aspect. So how then can you still sit there and talk about a theory speaking against LeBron James while you're trying to indirectly speak highly of Umar Johnson, knowing good and well that Umar Johnson's said degree would have had to come from the Europeans. Brothers and sisters, that's what hating does. You know who hates the idea, like I said before? Niggas are the ones who hate the idea of somebody building a school. This is what gets me, no offense intended, with the so-called conscious community too. Put down the Bible. Put down the Bible. It's a book. Why can't I read it? I'm an Israelite. I would never tell anybody to not read the Quran. You're still reading. I wouldn't tell as a Hebrew that a person should not study Sanskrit. You're still learning. I, wisdom, dwell with prudence and find out all knowledge of devices. Because I personally am already centered as Bnei Yisrael, a son of Israel, Ben Yisrael, all right? And I understand and respect Torah as the God for my life. I could read the Quran and still be as comfortable. Not going to affect me as far as going to, as the Torah says, the left or the right, because I don't pray to Allah. I pray to Yah. So that's not going to bother me. So when the conscious community then, in many cases, say, end quote, put down the Bible, maybe something in it is not resting with your spirit. And if it is, then you need to sit there and speak upon it. But if you're going to speak upon what in the Bible does it rest with your spirit, you then cannot tell the audience to not read it. See, that's what happens when a person is on hate mode. Next slide. Killing the lion meme, a different one, part 3. Now, according to this meme, white Europeans were they who ended slavery in modern times, and Africans continue slavery to this day. Yet, Africa's resources are controlled by whites. When you get to the aspect of understanding a book such as How Did Europe Underdevelop Africa? When you get into a book called The Scramble for Africa, if you know what happened in the 1880s with the guy, if I correctly saying his name as Leopold, and what happened with the people in the Congo with the rubber and so forth and so on, and how Africa was drained of its natural resources by the Europeans, how they had French West Africa, they had a part for Germany in Africa, they had Portuguese part of Africa, they had the Spanish part of Africa, and so forth and so on. Europeans from different parts of Europe took their own slice of Africa. Now, that to be known to be the case, you can get a book, I forget the author, but the name of the book is called The Scramble for Africa. The Scramble for Africa is a book that speaks about after the 1860s, how Europeans took their parts of Africa that they wanted to for themselves. And it still goes on to this day. This is how you get the Afrikaans in Southern Africa of today. Now, let's look at the left-hand side of this. And it says, now, yet Africa's resources are controlled by whites. So if whites are they who ended slavery in modern times, why are there people enslaved in white/European colonized places by anyone? See, look at the last paragraph, brothers and sisters, in the meme. Whites were the first people to stop slavery in modern times, whereas slavery still continues in Africa to this day. Brothers and sisters, whereas slavery still continues in Africa to this day. White people control Africa and sell Africans gold that came up out of Africa. There was an aspect of where the people in Ghana were delegating, if you want to use that word, about getting the gold back that the British took, such as what they call the golden stool in Ghana among the people of the Ashanti. You understand? It's already known, as stated from that book, The Scramble for Africa, that white people control the resources in Africa. So that being a fact, let's look at this last paragraph here on the right-hand side. If the whites now were the first people to stop slavery in modern times, how is it that Africa still has slavery to this day when white people are the ones who control Africa to this day? I'm gonna need an answer for that one. If We already can prove and show, as we did in history with sources, even in modern times, that the Europeans, that's to say the white people, control the resources in Africa. And if these same people, white people, right, are the ones who stopped slavery in modern times, then there should be no slavery in Africa, because you, great white man, is the one who control the resources. See the games with the meme scholarship? Somebody thought, as stated, niggas don't read, niggas don't think. You're supposed to play with LeBron James in the basketball game. How dare you sit back and want to sit there and analyze something? Why are you not bored just reading books? Why is your Amazon list filled with books? Why is your library keep on growing? Why do you want to study another language? I'm asking you, why, when I read books, you want to sit there and act like you are interested in holding a conversation? You just want to know what I'm reading. What you doing? What's going on? I acted like that as a child when I knew that I stole from my mother. May my mother rest in peace. I would have never had a problem or try to present a case. Mommy, don't go through my pockets right now. But something told her, my son has my money in his pocket. Boy, come here. Let me dig in your pocket and see. And the other time, I would have said, well, mommy, can you put $1 in the pocket while you're digging in it? But because I knew her dollars was stolen by me and put in my pocket, I had a problem when she put her hand in my pocket. You understand? So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. Next slide. Killing the lion meme, a different one, part 4. Let's go in scholastically. The Barbary slave trade refers to the slave markets that were extremely lucrative and vast on the Barbary coast of North Africa, which included the Ottoman provinces of Algeria, Tunisia, and Tripolitania, and the independent Sultanate of Morocco. Between the 16th and middle of 18th century, the Ottoman provinces in North Africa were normally under Ottoman sovereignty, pardon me. But in reality, they were mostly autonomous. That is to say, these Arabs in Northern Africa wasn't always under the Ottomans, but they actually were just doing their own thing. The North African slave markets were part of the Arab slave trade. The Arab slave trade. So whoever made this meme was lying, because you don't even see nothing in there about Arab. You see, it says in the second paragraph here, Africans enslaved 1.5 million white Europeans. No, white people who probably made this meme, you're lying to your own white people. Your former enslavers were Arabs, not blacks, not Africans. Your former slave masters in the Barbary slave trade, white man, were the Arabians. They were the Arabs, part of the people of the Ottomans, not the people that are Africans or blacks. So you're lying in this meme, white man or woman, whoever made this, to your white children. That's how much hatred you have for black people. That's how much hatred you have people of Africa. You're willing to lie on the oppression of your own people by naming a slave master that was not your slave master. That's crazy when you think about it. When we can sit there and show that the North African slave markets where the Barbary slave trade occurred was part of the Arab slave trade. And here you are sitting up here talking about it was Africans, knowing good and well, if you do a little study, brothers and sisters, the Barbary slave trade was not in the hands of Africans, it was in the hands of the Arabs. But you're willing to lie to your people, white people, your own brothers and sisters, your own ancestors, your own elders, your own mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, nieces, and cousins. You're willing to lie to them by naming the African as the slave master when history shows it was the Arab as the slave master. You ain't you know what. Let's keep it clean. Let's slide. Next slide. The Barbary coast. Pay attention. Now, this right here, brothers and sisters, is the Barbary coast. Remember, we were speaking of these countries earlier. Morocco, like Algeria, Tunisia, And all these, this is where the actual enslavement of the Barbary slave trade happened. All right in this vicinity right here. Black people of African descent were not in rule, brothers and sisters, of that area between the 16th and 18th century. Maybe BCE, not in CE, maybe before the Common Era. But if you're talking about in modern 500 years, no, they were not indigenous Africans that was ruling over here in this particular part where the Barbary slave trade was during that era. Let's go in. The matter of Arabs and Berserk. By 709, all of North Africa was under the control of the Arab Caliphate. In 693 AD, Caliph Abd al-Malik ibn Marwan sent an army of 40,000 men commanded by Hassan ibn al-Nu'man into Cyrenaica, and Tripolitania in order to remove the Byzantine threat to the Umayyads, advanced in North Africa. They met no resistance until they reached Tunisia, where they captured Carthage and defeated the Byzantines and Berbers around Berserk. Now, I want to emphasize something about Carthage, because by the time you get, brothers and sisters, to 693 AD or 693 CE, the people who were the original Carthaginians that had the Punic Wars with the Romans, they was already said, when you go to the Periplus of Homer, all right, they was already scattered, brothers and sisters, into Gambia. And I can show that inside the description. So this is something we want to go over for edification purposes. All right. Next slide. Sources cited regarding the matter. Africa was the first continent into which Islam spread from Southwest Asia during the early 7th century CE. Almost 1/3 of the world's Muslim population resides in the continent. Arab slave traders sold blacks as slaves to as far as Iraq. That comes from a book called Southern Blacks by John Bowles. I'm going to read parts, brothers and sisters, from the book that you see here on the right-hand side, Hebrewisms of West Africa, page 237. All right? 237. We want to read this for edification purposes. All right? And it says this. Muhammad and the Jews. The relations that had existed between the Mohammedans, that is to say, they who practice Islam, and the Jews, that is to speak of the house of Israel, had for the most part been friendly after the initial hatred of the prophet had worn itself out. In this connection, we are told by Samuel M. Zwemer the following. In the 7th year of the Hagera, that is to say in 629 AD, Muhammad assembled a force of 1,600 warriors and marched against the Jewish, that's to say the Hebrew, stronghold at Khaybar, Khaibar. The Jews were subjugated or slain, and there was much booty, including a new wife for the prophet. That's to say Muhammad, because they called him a prophet in certain cases. About 2 years previously, he had conducted an expedition against the Jews of Beni Qurayza, when 700 captives were slain. In the 6th year of the Hagera, also, there had been, quote, expeditions against the Jews and idolaters, quote. The prophet's earliest hostilities then would seem to have been against the Jews and idolaters. Now, that right there is speaking about Muhammad, who is the prophet in Islam, and how he felt toward the house of Israel and what he did in regards, in order to be done in regards to the house of Israel. In the Quran, chapter 17 is called Ibn or Bnei Yisrael in Arabic, or Bnei Yisrael if you were to say it in Hebrew, which essentially means the children of Israel. The Quran has an entire chapter dedicated to the children of Israel. In the Quran, chapter 17, it says that we send out men against those who do not receive the faith. What is that talking about? Because when Muhammad first came toward the Israelites did not sit there and accept Allah as God. See, in Hebrew, you had Elohim as one of the terminologies to say for God. Another term in Hebrew is Eloha. But what he was talking about was saying not the Aramaic Allah, but more so the aspect of Allah in Arabic, which means utmost. But being that Arabic was not the generalized form language of the Israelites did not accept Muhammad as a prophet, nor did they accept the Quran as the last message toward mankind. So Muhammad eventually then became upset with the Israelites and wanted to get at the Israelites in war. So this is something we want to show and point out for edification purposes. All right. Next slide. Oh, by the way, and this is not a shot against Muslims, but can somebody please explain why in Chicago in the 1980s and the 1990s, Muslims were known for beating Israelites up as if it was on some gangster disciples and vice lords kind of thing, or some blood and crip kind of thing? You understand? In Chicago in the 1980s and the 1990s, Muslims would jump Israelites if a black man laying claim to being an Israelite was seen wearing the things that Israelites wear. Why is that? I thought they accepted Musa, aka in English as Moses, said in our language Hebrew as Moshe, as a prophet. I thought they accepted who they say as Ibrahim, Ishaq, and Yaqub, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as prophets. The Israelites, they claim to be from Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So why are you jumping, brothers, and what have you, in Chicago in the 1980s and 90s, brothers? Why did that happen? Was it Islam supposed to be one who was at peace with himself with Muslim in terminology? Or were those Arabs part of the Ishmaelites in part, who took crafty counsel with the other nations to cut the name of Israel off from remembrance? Next slide. America and her friends and victims. Let's continue. The French too. This is written in French. It is about the death toll on a slave ship in 1731. Now you may want to pay attention to the part where the arrow is, because that's where you get 1731 at. All right. Note, the United States didn't exist in name until decades after such. The French were in what we call Florida until 1565, and in Louisiana until 1763. Stop. If the French were in what we call Louisiana of today, and this slave ship record is dated to the era of the 1760s, yet predate the naming of the United States, here we see evidence that the ships were in what we call America. Now, I want to take the time out now to make the correction with my typo. All right. I meant to say the era of the 1730s, not the 1760s. Yet predate the naming of the United States. All right. All right. Let's read this carefully. If the French, all right, let's go in, because I got a lot on my mind concerning all of this. All right. If the French were in what we call Louisiana of today, and this slave ship record is dated to the era of the 1760s. All right. What am I saying? That the French were in what we call the United States of today in Louisiana until the 1760s. But this slave record is dated to the 1730s. Yet predate the naming of the United States. Here we see evidence that the ships were in what we call America, in this case by the French. You understand? That's something we want to point out in that particular regard. But I want to emphasize that there was a typo right here. All right, pardon that. I want to make that correction verbally that this 1760s was supposed to say 1730s about the slave ship record that we see right here on the right-hand side. Yet the French were in part of what we call the United States to the 1760s. All right, holding hegemony. Let's go on to the next slide. Oh, I want to verbally state this record that you see here, you can get that by looking on the slave records from Yale, which is a college in the United States. YALE. All right. That's where you can look up that source concerning this right here. All right. What are we looking at? Abache or Abachi and Kujo Kazula. What are we looking at right here, brothers and sisters? Is total decimation, total annihilation of the concept that Black people are not recorded as coming off slave ships in what we call any part of the United States today. Here we see a woman. Notice the woman has a skirt on, but that's neither here nor there with the pants and the skirt. And here we see a man. These people were not born in what you call the United States of today. Let's go on. All right. From the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, the New York Public Library. They are from the last known U.S. slave ship, the Clotilde, or the Clotilda, said by some, which went to Alabama in 1860 with 110 captives from Africa. They, which are the people you see here, set up after 1865, Africa Town in Plateau, Alabama. See why I named this from Avaris in Egypt, as we went over in the past, to Alabama in America, as we're talking about right here? Brothers and sisters, I want to sit there and spend some time speaking upon this subject. And you can look this information up yourself. All right? This is not something you got to sit there and have permission to get into the library's vault or anything like that. This is for the record, public knowledge for those who are seeking it. See the difference between the aspect of I want to show you somebody else's video and the aspect of saying let's go and dig into getting some research, because though I'm making a video, I can't talk to videos. I talk in making videos. So I'm not knocking making a video. I'm just saying that it should not be the only way one is going to glean info. Now, Abache is the woman, also known in history as Clara Turner. And Kujo Kazula was also known as Kujo Kazula Lewis. And this picture is dated to the year 1914. 1914. Let's do the math. All right. Calculator. Let's look. 1914, take away 1865, gives you 49. All right. Let's understand that these people would have been considered elders, certainly over the age of 49, maybe in their 60s. So how old were they when they was inside the slave ship called the Clotilda or the Clotilde, both pronunciations being known for that aspect, which went to Alabama in 1860 with 110 captives from Africa. What you're looking at is a picture, brothers and sisters, of a Black man and a Black woman who is in America, but there's no way, shape, form, and fashion you're going to say that these people are native to what you call Turtle Island. This right here smashes, annihilates, decimates the concept of saying that there's no record of somebody coming off a damn ship out of Africa. We are the indigenous and autonomous people of this land right here. How do you explain this history here? Please explain that, because this is shown in picture, this is shown with dates, and this is shown being in Alabama, in the South. Next slide. Let's go. The evidence speaks. We're not coming with memes, O house of Israel. The evidence speaks. Let's see what this right here says in part of the United States of America. Old Plateau Cemetery, Africa Town Graveyard. And let's read the part here. That's why I didn't make it into two different parts, because I wanted it to be expanded. All right. The Old Plateau Cemetery, known as the Africa Town Graveyard, is the final resting place of enslaved Africans, African Americans, and a Buffalo Soldier. The burial ground dates back to 1876, 16 years after Africans arrived on the Clotilda, which was one of the last documented slave ships to leave Africa for the Americas. What are you talking about? There's no evidence of slave ships coming over here. Come on now. Did some black guys come online and sit there and think like the white man thought that, excuse me, niggas don't read? Come on now, get your studies up, man. This is not to be haughty, disrespectful, arrogant, or belligerent, but this is right in Alabama. Some of us got friends, cousins, and relatives. Because, you know, we got cousins that are relatives and cousins that are not, all right? Right in Alabama. I don't know of any immediate family in Alabama personally, but I know people who do. So you can look right there where it says Old Plateau Cemetery, Africa Town Graveyard. What are you talking about when you're saying that people who are quote unquote African Americans are not African? How then can they even be deemed, even though it's a weird terminology, African American? How did the said concept that the white man made up the Atlantic slave trade, according to some, how did that help white people? Being written in books as the kidnappers, the rapists, the extortionists, the ones who are family wreckers. How did that help them? There are numerous white historians that speak about the slave trade and what went down from Alexander Falconbridge in the 1700s and on. Look him up, Alexander Falconbridge, and see what you come up with. But this right here is something that cannot be disputed. I'm leaving it up there and speaking. As a matter of fact, I'm going to take an intermission and you sit back there and you read that and let me know what answer you come up with in the comment board when this video is done. I'm going to go and get me some water because I've been talking over an hour. Excuse me. Y'all sit there and look at that and let me know what you think after the video is loaded up. I am going to go get me some water. I got me some water. Thankful for that. I'm going to need somebody to answer from the community that says that there's no evidence of any quote unquote damn shit coming from Africa bringing us over here to the Americas. Because this right here and these two people that you see right here is evidence. Somebody thought, somebody didn't read. Or maybe they read it and hoped somebody else didn't read. You can go in the Schomburg Museum, which is in New York, for those who want to do that. It's in Manhattan. It's a nice place. Good place to take your children to if you want to get into history. You can look this up right there. See how the things are cited? But we're supposed to debate between Umar Johnson, who has no school, and how he had a theory and a good idea to be separate, even though his degree is given by the Europeans. But we're supposed to hate on LeBron James for having a school, and majority of the staff that's behind him is white. That's what we're supposed to sit there and debate online about all day long and all day night. While some people must have in hatred, like it says Esau has a hatred for the house of Jacob, somebody got a hatred for Africa, hard body, so hard. You didn't bother to look up this kind of information. This is known. This picture was taken in 1914. Let's look at this. This is now the year 2018. So if we do calculator, we got 2018, take away 1914. Oh my God, what? It's over 100 years old. I already knew the dating. I just want to sit there and go along with it. In 2014, this picture became a century. Now that's some history for you. Can you imagine the stories that they were going to be able to sit there and tell the people? Look up that information. Look up Old Plateau Cemetery, Africa Town Graveyard. All right? It says, and I want to follow this here with this arrow. All right? The burial ground dates back to 1876, 16 years after Africans arrived on the Clotilda, or Clotilde as stated, which was one of the last, I'm jumping the gun, sorry, which was one of the last documented slave ships to leave Africa for the Americas. And it went into Alabama. That's part of the Americas. The northern area of the graveyard, I stepped the gun again. Sorry about that. The northern area of the graveyard is the older section where the remains of Clotilda survivors have been found through an archaeological preservation project directed by the College of William and Mary. The historic annals of Africa Town are chiseled upon tombstones in this graveyard. You can't really get no more deeper information than that. From this point, this is helping you right there. See, for those who say, when I talk about the slave trade, you mostly talk about South America and the West Indies. And West Indians don't like us Black Americans, and some don't. I've experienced that. I've known so-called Trinidadians and Jamaicans who sit there and talk about, in layman terms, not to be harsh, my country, we don't deal with the Yankee, and they talking against the Black American, quote unquote. I've seen and experienced that. But you know what? That's their ignorance. They had the mind opposite of Marcus Garvey. You see, Marcus Garvey came to where the quote unquote Black American was and set shop up. See, he understood who his people were. That's something you want to point out for edification purposes. Now, getting back into this particular part right here, you may want to look this information up. Now, I know I jumped the gun in the slide, but y'all seen this enough. Let's go on. Let's go. The evidence speaks part 2. Union Baptist Church, organized in 1869 as the Old Baptist Church by Reverend Henry McGray and survivors of the slave ship Clotilda, or Clotilde, said by some, Polly Allen, Katie Cooper, Iona Kebe, Osi Kebe, Clay T. Lewis, Cujo Lewis, and Clara Turner. You know who Clara Turner is? Here, the lady you see here. That's Clara Turner. That was her given name when brought over to Alabama. You know who Cujo Lewis is? Him. The name he was given when he was brought over to America from Africa. Okay? So that shuts down that idea. There's no slave ship that came to America from Africa. What are you talking about? The Atlantic slave trade is told in reverse. Y'all don't know what you're talking about. The white man said you came out of Africa. No. History says that we came up and through there. Not the white man. Because he ain't gained nothing by telling what you're saying is a lie. If you're saying that the Atlantic slave trade is told in reverse, there's a couple of questions to ask. What is your plan to get your people that was shipped over to the East? Because see, Israelites have an answer on why people in the East in Africa, knowing that we were shipped over here, don't really claim us so much, because they know that they were not selling other Africans directly. They were selling Israelites who were called Africans. That's why. So we got to ask the same question. Even if our answer is not accepted, we want to ask the same question though. If you're saying that the Atlantic slave trade is told in reverse and it really went east and not west, and we are the autonomous people, not migrants by force or otherwise, into North America of today, I have to ask, when are you going to sit there and intend on getting your scattered people in the East? Or are you just going to say, you know what them? You ain't going to say that about your people, because if you are the indigenous people of North America and you're saying that the Atlantic slave trade truly went east, you're going to have to sit back there and explain, why are you not making a petition to sit there and gather your people that's scattered in the East and bring them all back home? Why is that? You understand? You got Israelites in the land of Israel. And I don't mean to be disrespectful in saying this. You got Israelites in the land of Israel that look at us Israelites in the camps on Shabbat like, why are y'all still in America? Why are y'all still in Jamaica, Queens? Why are y'all still in Flatbush, Brooklyn? Why are you still in the south side of Chicago? Why are you still in Washington, D.C.? Why are you still in Miami, Florida? Why are you still in Dallas, Texas? Why are you still in Compton, California? What are you doing, Israel? I want this to be noted. There are Israelites in the land of Israel that look at our camps in America and say, y'all wasting your time every Shabbat. Y'all may as well just come on home to the land that you've been talking about. Don't come to the Tel Aviv airport with your garments on, because the Jewish man is going to detain you. Come in dressed with the Karkanah, the Tommy Hilfiger, whatever else you're going to come in dressed in with. Then when you come in, we welcome you. That's what Israelites in Israel have told Israelites that just want to stay in Queens, that just want to stay in New York, that just want to stay, not to be harsh, in Greensboro, North Carolina, in Compton, California, and in Chicago, Illinois. You understand? So my question then, in light of that, because I want this to be emphasized again, there are Israelites in the land of Israel that look at us in our camps here and feel that we are wasting precious time trying to make it in the land of the beast called America. There are Israelites, and I don't agree with this sentiment though, but there are Israelites in the land of Israel that say my teachers, my family included, my relatives, family, and friends in the camps that I have attended and do attend, that we are not able to keep the Sabbath in the land of our captivity. I don't fully agree with that. But the point I'm emphasizing on is they are trying their best in the East, in many cases, to tell us in the West, y'all wasting your time, come on home. And it's not only Dimona, it's not only the community in Dimona, it's not only the community in Rich Ramon. There are Israelites in Jordan, on the east side of the Jordan, you know, where the ancient tribe of Gad and now and Manasseh and Reuben live. There are black people that left America that live in Jordan, that have conversed with us back here in the Western Hemisphere, like, what are y'all doing? Y'all wasting your time. You may as well just come on home. So looking at it in that particular regard, I'm asking the people who say that we are indigenous to North America and that the Atlantic slave trade is told in reverse and that the people were, according to them, truly taken, not coming to America, but from America going east. Where are your people and your descendants? Where is your video? Where is your bullhorn? Like even the Messianic Israelites that come out of 1 West 125th Street, that be with the bullhorn on the Coliseum block of Jamaica Avenue, that be with the bullhorn on Fordham Road in the Bronx, in New York City, you understand? And I'm not what you call Messianic, but I'm just noting what I've seen any Israelite doing. They're with the bullhorn trying to reach out to the people because in the era, brothers and sisters, of Giuliani, which was a mayor in New York, he had the microphone snatched away from the Israelites. So now you got Israelites teaching with bullhorns in the street. You understand? So where are your ideas to get your people back from the East? Because those who are in the East are calling for us to go home. So are you who's saying we're truly indigenous to the West? Are you calling for those who are in the East to come home to what you're saying is home? Because I want to say something. These people here, especially the man that you see here, though dressed in not Eastern garments, so it tells me, brothers and sisters, that the one called Cujo Lewis and the one referred to the lady as Clara Turner, they weren't saying that Alabama was home. Something tells me I really doubt they were saying that, but let's go on. The first pastor was Henry Watson. The church evolved from historic Stone Street Baptist Church and was built on a location known as the Playing Ground. In 1903, it was renamed Union Baptist Church. A sanctuary was constructed in 1918 and served as the first school for Magazine Point, presently known as Africatown. Final renovation, was in 1955. The African roots of this church continue to nourish the spirit of the community. The African American Heritage Trail of Mobile. Is that Mobile, Alabama? Perhaps. Maybe one could look into it. But I want to say this part here. Again, organized in 1869 as the Old Baptist Church. Remember, Christianity was the religion, just like we adopted their clothing in many cases and their style of speaking, such as English. We adopted their religion of Christianity as well. All right? By Reverend Henry McGray and survivors of the slave ship Clotilda. Now, right here, it says the old plateau cemetery known as the Africatown Graveyard is the final resting place of enslaved Africans, African Americans, and a Buffalo Soldier. The burial ground dates back to 1876, 16 years after Africans arrived on the Clotilda, which was one of the last documented slave ships to leave Africa for the Americas. Leave Africa for the Americas. The evidence is right there. I done saw pictures, I done read and reread, and I done sat there and read and got up and got water and came back. So it's up to you what you want to say at this point. Let's go on. This is a book for edification purposes, brothers and sisters. All right? Deuteronomy 28, The Condition of the Blacks. You can get that on Amazon, as well as Egypt Talking Writing, Did the Torah Come from the Culture of Tameri? You can get that online. Conclusion. Giving honor and praise unto the Most High, the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. Shalom.